Welcome to the 18th recorded lecture of my class, Haiti, the most important country in the world. We're going to be talking about the end of Henri Christophe, and more importantly, we're going to be talking about architecture and symbolic architecture and what it means. So I'll be sharing that with you today. Let's get into my class. As always, I am not an expert on Haiti. So if you are, please correct me anytime I need to be corrected or give me some nuance. This is a 200 level class. So it is made primarily for freshmen. So I'm trying to teach at that level. I would maybe like it to go a little bit deeper, but you know what? It's pretty deep as it is. Students and friends, I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I have undertaken to teach about Haiti. I want curiosity and a thirst for complex understanding to reign in this class. I am working to help that happen. Unite yourselves, students, and learn with me for the same cause. Oh, and also, why weren't you born in Haiti? Why weren't you in Haiti in 2010? Why aren't you living in Haiti now? Some people are. That's a question I'm asking my students who are mostly from Western New York to think more about the randomness of where we're born and what does it mean. Okay, I don't know what I'm going to call today's class. Symbolic architecture doesn't feel like many people want to learn about that, but you know what? It's what I want to teach. I want to teach about symbolic architecture. So you know, for the next class. So the next class this Wednesday, I'm going to be doing a review session, and then Friday is going to be the midterm, and then Monday is Dessalines Day, so I mean Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. It's actually not any of those things. It's just our break at school. So then I'll be coming back on Wednesday. Homework for Wednesday is actually reading a play, an actual play, half of a play. The first 50 pages of the following play, which you can find if you want to follow along by Aimé Césaire. He is not Haitian, but he wrote a beautiful Shakespearean modern tale of Henri Christophe and the tragedy of his life that we'll be talking about today. So if you want to follow along, you have to sign up for the Internet Archive, but you can get the book for free, or you can buy the book, you can download it, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can get it through Libby, you can get it through Audible, I'm sure. But that's what's coming up next for the class. Okay? So stick with me. All right. This is all based on this book, Haiti, The Aftershocks of History by Laurent Dubois. He's the historian who I use as a kind of textbook. Although, as we'll see, as the class gets going, there's sort of more and more outside material that we're referring to as well. I did want to say I really emphasize the differences between Pétion and Dessalines, and Henri Christophe, but it's really nice that they actually agreed a fair amount on the importance of education. As Dubois puts it, Christophe's interest in education was of long standing as far back as 1805. He strongly criticized Dessalines for his neglect of teachers, angrily proclaiming that this lack of support for schools exposed Dessalines as a barbarian with no idea of civilization and capable of regenerating the nation. Merely a brutal soldier, happy only when he's surrounded by bayonets. So I like that image and I like that idea, and especially that Henri Christophe is often mocked for his pretensions to nobility and aristocracy. But he was focused on education in a way that neither Toussaint nor Dessalines were particularly focused. And in the South, we had a similar impetus from Pétion, excuse me. I always call him Footpath instead of Pétion. On taking power in 1807, he declared that public education was, after religion and liberty, the most precious thing for any population. So that's really important. The nature of building up the civic infrastructure so that the place that you are fighting for is worth fighting for. At the end of last class, I had this quote up about Henri Christophe that, in fact, even though he did not have the republic, even though he had the kingdom, in many ways, it was a more egalitarian society than there was in the South. So what did France think about this whole situation? Well, we do need to tell a story of, Henri Christophe is a king. So his son should end up being King Henry II, right? But King Henry's son, who is sent to get an education in France, the French don't like him. They're not going to grant him anything. So they put him in an orphanage and they take him out of the school and they make him an apprentice to a cobbler. and he doesn't like it. So they killed him. They killed his son. They killed his son. They killed his son. Who is they? France. France killed Henri Christophe's son. That's what's going on here. So what does Christophe think about France? Hey, hey, wait, this slide is kind of boring. Usually, when I talk about a country, I will have either an outline of their country or even better, a flag. I should have a flag in the background. I should have the flag of France in the background. Sky, shouldn't you put the French flag behind him as like a cool stylistic element? Oh, sorry, that's slightly younger me. I did. Let me explain. That is the French flag. No, this is not a joke about the French surrendering. The French have surrendered a couple of times in recent history, but they have also been at multiple times the most powerful nation in the world. And the propaganda that the French always surrender is British propaganda to make themselves feel better, but they have an entire channel, an entire, they are on an island. They have defensive postures that France could never even dream of. Anyways, no, that's not the joke. The joke is that this is what represents France. This is after the monarchy has been reinstated. Now, listen, do I have a cartoon in mind? I do. Is the cartoon Dessalines tearing out the white of the French flag, and then that little piece of fabric going all the way to France and becoming the new French flag? I do. But it's important. It's an important joke that I'm making because the white doesn't represent in the French flag. The white does not represent white people. It represents royalty. Whiteness is associated with royalty. Think of Real Madrid, Kylian Mbappe's team, Chouameni's team, a bunch of other randos who no one cares about's team. Like they are white because they are affiliated with the king. Real, like Royal Madrid. Like that's why they're Los Blancos. Whiteness is monarchy. So that's why it's the flag, because Napoleon had been taken out. So he obviously is not a big fan of France, who he's been fighting against and who killed his son. So he goes to their natural ally. He goes to their enemy, which makes him a natural ally, England. Now that's a flag. But of course, England does not officially recognize Haiti. I should hope you would know why if you read pages 69 to 88. Nice. If you read those pages in Aftershocks of History, you should know the answer. They were afraid of the contagion of slave revolts. It's a thing which I try to explain to my students, and I'll just try to explain to you. People in power are terrified of contagious ideas that can undercut their power. That's why the Cold War existed, because capitalistic democracies were afraid of the contagion of communism. The war on terror was partly against the contagion of anti-Americanism, the contagion of some kind of, I don't know, um anti-American, pro-Islam worldview. So we spread democracy, is what we said we were doing. And even right now, we are constantly afraid, people in power are constantly afraid of contagious ideas. Ideas of feminism, of equality, of trans rights. All these ideas are treated like sicknesses that need to be removed because this kind of progress is treated as a form of contagion. So that is the issue. The issue is the English think that slave revolts are contagious because they are. Because once you realize you don't have to be enslaved, you might try to break free. Also, England, even though they're constantly at war with France, they don't want to antagonize them so directly. So this is what they agreed to. To deal with, on equal terms with Haiti, they assumed would send a message to their own population that an anti-slavery revolt was acceptable. And in the second part, the British promised they would not interfere if the French attacked their former colony. In return, France formally accepted Britain's right to trade with Haiti. We're back again to the exclusive. If you go all the way back to class number 3, class number 3, pre-revolution Haiti was complicated. The idea that England would be able to trade with Saint Domingue is the thing that basically started all of this, because the big whites, les grands blancs, got mad that they weren't getting all the money. They were just getting some of the money off of the exploitation of all the Africans. So they wanted to start a revolution. So that started the dominoes of everything falling. Their demand for freedom as slave drivers. So he turned to Clarkson and Wilberforce. If you've ever studied English history, you'll know that Wilberforce is credited as the person who abolished slavery in the British Empire. I suggest you read a book called Capitalism and Slavery, and I suggest you listen to an album called by Moore Mother, all about this topic. It's quite interesting. It's a little bit more ambiguous than that, but still it made sense. And so, listen, they're desperately looking for a recognition. They're desperately looking for recognition. Haiti needs to be recognized so that they can trade. Sorry, my chair is so like creaky. If I move up, will it be less creaky? Yeah, it's better. Um, I mean, now it's a worse angle for me, but that's okay. They need to be recognized. They need to have normal diplomatic relations so they can trade, so they can they can be a part of the international community. And so Christophe fights with Clarkson, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. They don't get it. Meanwhile, in France, the Treaty of Paris 1814 abolishes slavery in Europe, but not in the colonies. So, George, this is what I said. This is what I said to my students. When Napoleon loses, does England try to take over France? No. They make sure to put a king in power because the thing they're afraid of is the contagion of democracy. They're afraid of the contagion of people deciding their own rights, not having God decide who's going to be king. Do you get it? The contagion of democracy. That's what England was trying to stop. So they put Louis the 18th in power, the next in the line. Louis the 17th died. So the next in line of the Bourbon Restoration. Bourbon was named the people that Louis the 14th and 15th were, all that. 16th, right? So this is the idea. This is how they're going to combat the contagious, terrible idea of democracy. Napoleon was not properly exiled. He comes back, he rules for 100 days, and he abolishes the slave trade. The trade. Not slavery itself, but just the trade. Still, something's better than nothing. Nobody is all one thing. Napoleon himself had in fact concluded the same thing, admitting on his deathbed that targeting Louverture, targeting Toussaint, had been one of the great mistakes of his career. Think about that. One of the most powerful people in the history of civilization was undone. And listen, we always talk about him being undone by the Russians, and with good cause, right? The Russians were a huge part of his losses in Europe. But if it weren't for those crafty, brave, relentless, fearless, former enslaved people rising up and not being sold back into slavery, if it weren't for that, what could have possibly happened? Would he have lost? Think of all the tens of thousands of soldiers that were sent and were lost. Think of what would have happened. Why is it a regret? What would have happened if Napoleon had said to Toussaint, "You and I, our skin is different, but our ambitions are the same. We want France to rule over the entire globe." Toussaint would have taken that deal, probably. He would have he at least would have taken part, and we'd be living potentially in an entirely different world, one without slavery as of like 1815, and with a large portion of the Western Hemisphere controlled by former slaves, formerly enslaved people. Excuse me, I'm still getting that term out of my terminology. It may be on some slides too. I apologize. These are old slides. But he didn't. And he recognized on his deathbed the mistake that he made. What took out Napoleon? Yeah, it was his hubris. Yeah, it was the Russians, but it was also the Haitians. So what does France think about this whole situation? Well, they two truths and a lie. They believe two things that are true and one thing that's a lie. All right. That this is the last stronghold of the French Revolution. How beautiful is that? To think of the Black Jacobins, as CLR James calls them, as the final Jacobins. The revolution's officially over and it's been replaced with the monarchy. They're trying to go back to zero. They're trying to go back to the old ways. Conservatives are trying to be conserved, right? Also, it's a mark of shame for all colonial powers. It's a represents fear. Maybe this could happen in Martinique. Maybe this could happen in Guadeloupe. Maybe this could happen all over the place. And then the final thing they think of is the thing that's obviously wrong, is that they say they believe that slavery is inherent to the black race. Once again, slavery was not linked to race for most of human history. It's fairly recent that race is considered to be a part of slavery. It just happens to be recent history. To protect white supremacy in the colonial order, it was simply intolerable that 300,000 Africans had stolen from 30 million Frenchmen the most beautiful and useful of their possessions. I asked my students, I said, what did they take? What did they steal? What property did these 300,000 Africans steal from the 30 million Frenchmen? And to my students' credit, they didn't have the answer. They didn't know. What did they take? Was it sugar? Was it arms? Was it? They took themselves. They're the property. That's the idea. The French officially believe that enslaved people are to be traded like furniture. They actually believed that these people were their property. And when they freed themselves, they were stealing from their owners. It's obscene. I was happy that my students didn't know the answer. I was happy. I mean, I kind of wish they knew because I'd hope they know at this point in the class. But still, it's such an odious concept. But that's the truth. That's the way people thought. And they thought that an enslaved person who frees themselves has stolen from his previous master. So you just sit with that, understanding that that's the way that a lot of people truly believed in not that far away history. And you wonder why we're still fighting against racism in all of its forms now. You wonder why people who are fighting against racism don't allow any racism, not a little bit, not a little teeny tiny oopsie doopsie micro dicro thing, because we know where it comes from and we know where it goes. It goes into people fighting for their own freedom and then being told that they have stolen their own personhood. They robbed Haiti, the most important country in the world. This is why. These are discussions. You know, in America, thank God, we're discussing how much reparations do we owe the descendants of enslaved people. That's the question to ask, not how much do the enslaved people owe their former owners. So Pétion suggests indemnity. And this is going to be what's going to dominate the second half of the class. Just pay them. Pay the men. An indemnity was an elegant way of solving the problem of political recognition. The country would remain free and independent, and those who'd been victims of its revolution would receive some form of compensation. Compensation. Pétion was not trying to damn his country to over a century of oppression and misery and economic deprivation. But that was what he did. This idea of paying France back for the property that they lost in losing their slave state. That's the indemnity, unintended consequences. Haiti in the eyes was the last province of France still under the control of the Jacobins, and one that should fall to counter-revolution like all the other parts of France. They added furthermore that European empires had a clear interest in uniting to crush Haiti, whose existence, let us be frank, is shameful for all colonial governments. No one will accept in the middle of the Caribbean a foyer of revolt, a hideout for pirates and brigands, a school for revolution, one former planter declared. Of course, these planters have a lot more attention in France. The people in power are kings. The aristocracy is coming back. It's all designed for people who have money, power, and land given to them in a hereditary way to keep it going. There's a reason why racism and aristocracy are connected, because they both believe that the randomness of birth determines how much power and money you get. Another argued that the Haitian state was an illegal entity since it had been founded by slaves on the law that had always forbidden slaves to own any property. For those who believe, as these planters did, that slavery is inherent to the black race, Haiti was an aberration, unnatural, and untenable. This is the attitude that the rest of the world I'm gonna write something down here. Haiti is untenable. Its existence is an insult to people who believe in systemic racism, who believe in the inferiority of people of African descent. The need to put Haiti down. This was a belief that people have. They have the idea. It is something that they think exists. It is not in the past. Everything I'm reading to you right now, everything right here that I'm writing to you. Okay? People who think that slavery is inherent to the black race, Haiti was an aberration and untenable. It is in the present tense that these thoughts are had, and they are exhibited in many different ways, from they're eating the dogs to 1,000 other things that we're going to be discussing in this class. These are not dead ideas. These ideas are alive and well in a white supremacist society that uses Haiti over and over and over and over and over and over and over again as a scapegoat and as evidence of their own iniquitous system. That's why you have to keep watching these damn videos. I probably should have written have. That would have been I was building up for some kind of something dramatic. These are ideas that people have, okay? And this is what my class is trying to fight against. What's the importance of being recognized? So I show this without commentary. I show this without commentary. This is, as of September 2025, the countries that recognize both Israel and Palestine, the countries that recognize Israel only, and the countries that recognize Palestine only. Why is there, why was there, but what was that? Why did you see that? They were like balloons. Anyways, I don't know what's going on my my website here. And I just make it clear that what's the importance? Well, the importance is international recognition leads to trade deals. Importing, exporting leads to support in terms of international law, in terms of sovereignty, in terms of protection. It is very important, especially when a state is vulnerable, when it is small and vulnerable. So that means all those countries in red think that Israeli people do not exist. They do not exist. There are people who call themselves Israelis who live in Palestine. The people in blue believe that Palestinians do not exist, that there is a land called Palestine, but only Israeli people live there. They are the only inhabitants. And then the people in tan believe in both. So the reason why it's interesting is America, you know, if we weren't recognized by the rest of the world, we have enough land, we have enough power, we'd probably be okay. It would take a little while. We'd probably eat a lot more corn, but we'd probably be okay. But a country like Palestine and a country like Israel, whatever you want to call that piece of land, I'm not going to solve the Israeli conflict here, talking about Haiti, but like it's really important to be recognized. And so think about the nature of what's happening in Haiti in history. You know, America is recognized in 1783 by the British. Oh, whoops. Sorry, my screen sharing is paused. Let's share. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And now I'm going to share here. Sorry, I was like kind of building up to something there. Okay, good. And I'm recording still? Yes. England represented the United States of America after the Revolutionary War in 1783 because they lost. France lost Haiti, but they will not recognize it until 1825. And it's going to come with a price tag that the people will not be able to make. And this recognition is so important because we're talking about a little teeny tiny island, a little teeny tiny part of an island. They need trade. They need support. They need recognition. They need to be known to exist. Up until 1825, not only did Haiti not exist in the mind of the French, everybody, including the United States of America, including England, including Spain, everybody in the world wanted to align with France because of all those things I just said. These ideas about what Haiti represents, no one will accept in the middle of the Caribbean a foyer for Velt, hideout for pirates and brigands, a school for revolution. No one will accept it then. Those are ideas that people had and that they have. So let's talk about Sans Souci, the palace of Henri Christophe. Hey, everybody. How many large structures have you been to that were made by Africans in the Western Hemisphere in the 19th century? Made for and by Africans. I'll wait. What does sans souci even mean? This is where things get super interesting to me. This is, I'm an art history professor. I mean, I'm an art history student. So I love art history. I love architecture. Do you know what sans souci actually means linguistically? It's a French term. It means no worries. Sans means without, souci, worry. That's a funny name to call something in Haiti without worries, a place where people worry quite a bit. Now, maybe it's because of Grenada. So there's a theory here that maybe Christophe was born in Grenada. There's a lot of places he could have been born. His whole life is shrouded in mystery, but there's a chance that he was born in Grenada and that he was born in the part of Grenada called Sanssouci. So he was naming it after a place that he associated with his childhood before he was brought over to Saint-Domingue, which would then later be called Haiti. Maybe. Maybe that's why. But I think a more interesting reason is tied into this question of Bosal versus Creole. So Bosal are people who are born in Africa. As a reminder, the majority of people living in Haiti in 1804, when the Declaration of Independence is declared, the majority of people living in Haiti were born in Africa. Because the slave trade was so profitable, they just kept upping the numbers and upping the numbers and upping the numbers. Okay? But most of the leaders, most of the generals, most of the people in power, most of the landowners were Creole, who have a completely different life experience. It's very different being abducted as an adult and being enslaved for a period of time and then breaking free versus being born into slavery. So I'm going to tell you the story of this guy over right here. His name is Jean-Baptiste. Jean-Baptiste Sans Souci. Of course, we're talking about Sans Souci. We're talking about him. That's not actually him, I don't think, but I'm just going to say that's him. Born in Africa, so he's a Bosal. He was a great slave rebellion leader. He served under Toussaint. He never served Leclerc. He hid in the mountains. Okay, he switched to Leclerc briefly, but he was a rival to another young general, Henri Christophe. And he represented the power of the Bosal because the Bosal, for the most part, never actually gave in to any European power. They didn't really need to. They were like doing their own thing. They'd previously maybe been marooned, right? So those were enslaved people who just went off and made their own communities in the woods and in the hills and stuff where people couldn't find them or get to them. They had a whole different system of warfare, whole different experience, languages, all that stuff. So like Sanssouci represented that. And he was a very good leader, a very good general, and he was a rival to Henri Christophe. And this battle can be seen in the context of, sorry, can be seen in the context of Creole versus Bosal, because of course Henri Christophe represents the Creoles. So Dessalines says, "Hey guys, you got to work it out. You can't be fighting each other." And actually, according to what you read, it seems as though Sanssouci was ready to work alongside with Henri Christophe. He was going to stop fighting. He was going to go into the fold. And of course, Henri Christophe is just going to kill him anyway. He's going to kill him anyway because Because he does, right? Because he does, because he did, because he could represent a threat, or because he's bitter, or whatever it is, or because it's a revolution. He kills Sans Souci. So why does he name the palace Sans Souci? Is it to honor the fallen rival and therefore foster peace amongst the blacks against the Bosal and the Creole? Is this an act of reconciliation? It could be. We could see it as an act of reconciliation, saying like, "Look, I named this after your great leader. I'm sorry that I had to kill him, but I honor him now." Like Massachusetts. You ever been to Massachusetts? It's named after people who we killed, right? Did we honor them? Lake Seneca. Are we honoring the Seneca by naming the lake Lake Seneca? Well, that's what we think we're doing. Or, or is it to bury the memory of the bitter enemy and remind the Bosal of their subjugation? Yeah, we can name our hockey team the Blackhawks, and you can't do anything about it, but we're just honoring you. We exterminated you as best we could. And if there's any of you left and you want to complain about this, we're going to tell you that you're wrong because we're honoring you. Or is it a style of domination? I ask my students, what would you feel like if somebody killed you and named their house after you? Would you think that they were honoring you? But all these things are so complex. So he names his palace. I'm not there yet, actually. Let's talk about Versailles. We've been talking about Versailles a lot in this class. That's where Louis XIV built his palace. A lot of it was made off of the exploitation of Africans, of the slave trade, right? That's where a lot of that money comes from. That's why I say to think of it as being a place that is trigger warning for those who don't like blood, to see it as a place that's drenched in blood. But what is it really? It's a beautiful place. You should go there. It's should be, if you are traveling to France, Versailles is easily in the top 15 places to visit in France. It's really great. France is such an amazing place to visit. Oh, and the beaches at Normandy are not in the top 50. You should not go, if you are an American, do not go to Normandy. Don't go all the way to France just to be reminded of how great the American military is, okay? There's other things to see. But what is Versailles? Versailles is state architecture used as propaganda to emphasize the power and glory of the king and his rule. That's what it is. That's the function that it serves. I ask my students, why was it that in the 19th century we built the Capitol and the White House, and they look like old Roman buildings with columns and stuff? It's to emphasize state power and the glory of our leaders, the glory of our democracy, the connection that we have to the past, the eternal future, empire. All those things are all implied by our architecture. That's why we do it. That's why we do it. State architecture is propaganda, always, not sometimes, always. State architecture is always propaganda for the state, no matter what it looks like. If it's super utilitarian, then that's the message. If it's gold and gaudy, then that's the message. If it's modern, then that's the message. If it's whatever it is, there is a message that's always there. And Versailles is made to emphasize the power and glory of the king. And look at this. Look at that in Potsdam, Germany, what was then called Prussia. King Frederick made Sans Souci his palace. Beautiful place. I'd love to go there sometime. I love that color yellow. I used to have a poster of this up in my wall when I was younger. My girlfriend at the time had it. It's a nice place, right? But what is it? It's state architecture used as propaganda to emphasize the power and the glory of the king and his rule. That's what that is. Again, one more time. One more time. That's what it is. So, what is Sans Souci? This is what it looked like when Christophe lived there. And by the way, it is also the setting of the play that I'm having you read by Aimé Césaire, The Tragedy of King Christophe. It all takes place in this palace. It is state architecture used as propaganda to emphasize the power and the glory of the king and his rule. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Murder and division amongst ex-enslaved people. That's what sans souci means. Plus the need to either reconcile or threaten possible rebels. That's also what sans souci means, equals sans souci. The heads of state need to project power through architecture, plus the egomaniac leader needs to show off how powerful he is, equals sans souci as well. Which means that sans souci plus sans souci equals sans souci. And we might even want to add in that other sans souci, but I just threw that in there because I needed to say it, but I don't know if it's actually complete. That might be apocryphal. So that's what Souci is, and that's the building, and it's one of the wonders of the world. And I can't wait to go there, but I may never make it there because I don't know when it'll ever be safe enough for me to. I don't know when I will ever feel safe enough to travel to Haiti. There's a difference between being safe and feeling safe. They're very different things. Maybe I would be safe, but might not feel it. And frankly, I'm a nervous traveler. But still, this is the top of my list. If I could transport myself anywhere in the world right now, it would be to go right here because I want to see this amazing testament. Also, not for nothing, beware of Wikipedia. In 2018, I found this that said that she moved to Sanssouci Palace in 1798. That is still on Wikipedia. Um, and um, hey, it wasn't even begun to be built till 1713. So it is symbolic architecture. What did it symbolize? Former enslaved people can create structures that rival Europeans. Good. Built on a plantation that the king used to manage. Interesting. He did. He used to manage a plantation there. It was constructed with great brutality towards workers. Bad. This is contested by some historians, so just to let you know that. It symbolized the king's distance from people. Bad. It symbolized Creole oppression of Bosal. Bad. Symbolized king's opulence and ridiculous love of showing off. Bad. After his death, it was ransacked and left to rot and ruin. Of course, history is complex, but all of these things are implied by this. Now, speaking of symbolic architecture, there was no doubt that if the King of France wanted to send all of his forces bearing down a group of rebel subjects to barely make up 1/100th of the people of his kingdom, who would neither have within them the great military, moral, or material resources, that they could attack them and take it back over. The Haitians knew that. So they were interested in it. In the book, they go all over. Malouet was this guy who was like working with Louis XVIII and figuring out how to just redo it. He wanted to invade and he wanted to recreate it where people with the lightest skin got the most rights and the people with the darker skin got the fewest rights. Okay. He suggested just killing and exiling the most rebellious blacks. Okay. All these things. He brought over special military honors to give to them in exchange. He thought that was going to work. And all the diplomats got their throats cut because that's what you had to do. That was probably the right move. But that's why La Citadel is so important. I'm sorry, I keep checking on the time because I have a student coming in 10 minutes. I'm fine. This will be good. La Citadel, just as a reminder, Henri Christophe burned down his own house, his own mansion, when Leclerc showed up in 1793. Okay? He burned it to the ground. They had a scorched earth policy, which meant that if the French arrive by sea, which they have to, then they are going to burn it all down. I'm sorry, right out the window is my dean, my provost, the president of my college. What are they all doing there? Okay, anyways, as long as I'm not supposed to be there. Where was I? Yes. As long as they could stay away from the coast, they could potentially protect themselves. So let's look at this. Let's look at this beautiful building. Okay. Let's imagine that the French invade. If the French invade, the first thing the Haitians are going to do is burn their city to the ground. They've done it before, they can do it again. Then they burn all the crops, and then they put everybody up here at the top of this mountain, which means the French can travel all the way inland, and then get to the bottom of a hill at absolute not having the high ground and attack people who have enough provisions to stay there for a year. That's what they can do if they want to take it back. It's symbolic and it's functional. It's atop a mountain. It is to protect against the French. It enabled the scorched earth policy. Thousands could live there for a year. Now, whether or not it was built with slave labor or virtual slave labor, people were paid, but it most likely was difficult conditions because can you imagine carrying that many rocks back then in the 1810s? A crazy construction system that I still don't fully understand. So beautiful. Such a beautiful building. Where did they get all the cannonballs? Where did they get all the cannons? They don't have foundries like that in Haiti. Well, thank you, French people. You could try to invade. We'll just take it and we'll keep it. And that's what it looks like. And that's where one day I will go. But now we're going back to 1820. We're going back. The citadel is built. Sanssouci is built. Henri Christophe has managed to not only recreate an aristocracy or create an aristocracy, control this land with a fair amount of equality amongst people, at least the most they've experienced in their lifetime. Still not equality, but making improvements, obviously. He's seen as a dictator. He's not particularly well loved, but here he is. He's made the one beautiful thing that represents society, civilization, arts, culture, sans souci. That's where this story is going to take place. And then the other that represents the militaristic might, right? So it's kind of the mixture of like the civic life and the militaristic life. Okay. But then, much like some American presidents, he has a stroke in 1820. And when that happens, people revolt. They're happy. They're screaming down with Henri. They're saying, "Long live freedom." They're attacking him. He's lost it. He's lost the will of the people. He retires to Sans Souci and he shoots himself. Now, listen, was Sans Souci buried underneath Sans Souci? Was the rebel leader buried there? I don't know. But what I do know is that that's a myth that is sometimes told. And the other thing I do know is that that's what makes this so amazing. I told you it's Shakespeare. It just happens to be with formerly enslaved people and happens to be written in the 20th century. You can't get more Shakespearean than this. Shooting yourself on the in the building named after your former foe, potentially falling on top of the space where his body existed. That's the distance. It's 2 hours and 7 minutes by walk. His wife takes his body. This might remind you of Défilé La Folle, the person who picked up Dessalines' body and buried it. But here, his wife takes his body the 6 kilometers all the way to the citadel where he is buried. His body is somewhere in there. I don't know where, but his body is in there. Henri Christophe's body is in there. Oh, just so you know, it's a 14-minute drive. Man, I cannot wait to go. But don't worry, King Henry II should exist. King Henry II should be there because remember the first King Henry II, he was killed by the French. But 10 days after Christophe's death, King Henry II is bayoneted to death. They killed Christophe's son. Who is they? The first time they killed Christophe's son, it was France. The second time, it was Haiti. Do you not see the tragedy of people trying to make something out of less than nothing? People trying to make a state, trying to make heritage, trying to make culture, trying to make education, trying to make dynasty, trying to make all these things, and everybody just keeps killing them. Either their own people kill them in anger or the external forces kill them out of fear. It's just constant. It's constant and it's constant. And it's grand. And that's what makes Christophe a quite complicated figure in history, part 2239. I'm not going to do the whole like good and bad of Henri Christophe. I should hope it would be clear by now, and that student's going to be arriving very soon. But I hope you find that story interesting. And in particular, I hope this brings you to read Aimé Césaire. He's from he's from Martinique. But it's just one of the greatest works of fiction of the 20th century. But the thing is, if you haven't studied everything that we've done up until now, it's not that good. I mean, it's good, but it's not that clear. You know, like understanding history when you read historical fiction is really important. So, like, this is going to be your reward, reading the first 50 pages. Read it for next Wednesday, okay? And I'll be here to teach about it. You can see how I teach literature. All right. Well, until next time, smrt fascismu, slobodo narodu. There's the camera.